Stevie Nicks has spent decades carrying the weight of a story that shaped not only her music, but her life. Her connection with Lindsey Buckingham was more than romance, more than collaboration. It was a storm that never truly passed. Behind the fame, the platinum records, and the unforgettable songs, there was a private battle that left scars deeper than anyone outside the band could see. And now, after years of silence, she has chosen to speak with a candor that leaves no doubt about how much she endured. The beginning of a complicated love story. The story between Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham began long before Fleetwood Mac was a household name. They first crossed paths in 1966 as teenagers in the Bay Area of California. At the time, neither could have imagined the creative storm they would unleash together. Buckingham was already recognized for his guitar skills, while Stevie possessed a raw voice that could pierce through any room. They remained acquaintances until the early 1970s, when fate brought them back together at San Jose State University. Lindsey asked Stevie to join his band, Fritz, a psychedelic folk rock group that became their first shared stage. Though their romance didn't ignite immediately, there was always an undeniable spark between them, one that grew stronger after Fritz disbanded. By 1973, they were not just partners in love, but also in music. They poured everything into their debut album as a duo, Buckingham Nicks. The record didn't succeed commercially, except in Birmingham, Alabama, where local DJs embraced it and gave them a small but devoted following. Still, the project served as the ultimate showcase of their potential together. The intimate album cover, where both appeared nude, symbolized a union of vulnerability and ambition. But beneath the surface, cracks were already visible. Stevie later admitted in a 1977 interview that she had always been too ambitious for most men, and even in the early days, their dynamic was shaped by tension between Lindsey's control and Stevie's independence. Their fortunes shifted dramatically when Mick Fleetwood, searching for new members for Fleetwood Mac, stumbled upon the Buckingham Nicks record. He was impressed by Buckingham's guitar work and extended an invitation. Buckingham made it clear he wouldn't join without Stevie. Mick, who later confessed he barely thought about Stevie at first, quickly realized they were inseparable, creatively, personally, and musically. That decision would alter the future of rock history forever. Fleetwood Mac's rise and the breaking point. When Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham officially joined Fleetwood Mac in 1975, it was the start of a new era for the band. The lineup of Nicks, Buckingham, Mick Fleetwood, John McVie, and Christine McVie produced a sound that was both fresh and deeply emotional. Their self-titled album Fleetwood Mac soared to the top of the charts in the United States, bringing hits like Rhiannon and Landslide. For Stevie, these songs were not just music. They were pieces of her heart, reflections of uncertainty, ambition, and the fragility of love. But even as the band reached new commercial heights, Stevie and Lindsey's personal relationship was unraveling. The constant touring, the pressure to produce hits, and their contrasting personalities created an environment that magnified every flaw in their partnership. Stevie later described Lindsey as a perfectionist, meticulous to the point of suffocation, while she thrived on spontaneity and freedom. They were two artists whose visions collided as often as they aligned. And in the midst of success, the romance that had once fueled their synergy began to collapse. By the time Fleetwood Mac began recording Rumors in 1976, the group was drowning in personal chaos. Every member was dealing with a breakup. John and Christine McVie ended their marriage, Mick Fleetwood discovered his wife was having an affair, and Stevie and Lindsey were at the bitter end of theirs. Yet somehow, out of all this turmoil, came one of the most iconic albums in music history. Stevie poured her heartbreak into Dreams, a song that carried a sense of melancholy acceptance, while Lindsey fired back with Go Your Own Way, a track seething with anger and resentment. The contrast was striking. Two perspectives of the same breakup, immortalized side by side on the same record. Rumors was released in 1977 and became an instant phenomenon. It topped charts worldwide, selling millions of copies and spending 31 weeks at #1 in the United States. Fans were captivated not only by the music, but also by the raw honesty behind it. Listeners knew these songs were born from real pain, and that made them even more powerful. Behind closed doors, however, the situation was darker. Stevie began using cocaine heavily just to survive the endless recording sessions and the emotional toll of performing alongside her former lover. Engineer Ken Kailat later recalled that Rumors was fueled by a community bag of cocaine, a destructive habit that would haunt Stevie for years. While the world embraced the record as a masterpiece, Stevie and Lindsey's relationship had reached a point of no return. They broke up for good during the making of Rumors. Stevie later remembered telling Lindsey after one final explosive fight that she would fly home without him. It was the definitive end of their romance, but it was also the beginning of decades of lingering animosity that would never fully disappear. Solo stardom, addiction, and separation. After Rumors turned Fleetwood Mac into global icons, the band tried to move forward with Tusk in 1979. The album, largely driven by Lindsey Buckingham's experimental vision, was costly and polarizing. While it produced memorable tracks, it also revealed how fractured the group had become. For Stevie, the experience only deepened her need to find her own space as an artist. In 1981, she released her first solo album, Bella Donna. It was an immediate success, debuting at #1 on the Billboard charts and giving the world unforgettable hits like Edge of 17 and Stop Dragging My Heart Around. For a moment, Stevie stood fully in her own light, separate from the turbulence of Fleetwood Mac. Yet even as her star rose, she carried heavy personal struggles. The cocaine habit she picked up during the recording of Rumors had grown into a full-blown addiction. By 1985, she checked herself into the Betty Ford Center to get clean, but recovery was complicated. When she left rehab, Stevie was prescribed Klonopin, a tranquilizer meant to stabilize her. Instead, it created a new dependence that nearly destroyed her creativity. She later described those years as a haze, saying that the drug robbed her of nearly a decade of her life. During the recording of Fleetwood Mac's 1987 album Tango in the Night, she was often absent, detached from the process that once defined her. Meanwhile, her interactions with Lindsey remained tense, laced with unresolved anger and resentment from their breakup years earlier. That same year, their fragile connection finally exploded. As the band prepared to tour in support of Tango in the Night, Lindsey announced he would not be joining. Stevie's reaction was visceral. She later admitted that she tried to strangle him during the argument, and he chased her out into Christine McVie's driveway in one last chaotic showdown. It was the final break. Lindsey walked away from Fleetwood Mac, leaving Stevie and the remaining members to carry on without him. By 1991, Stevie herself decided to step away. When Mick Fleetwood refused to include her solo track Silver Springs on a Fleetwood Mac box set, she quit the band entirely. For her, it was a wound too deep to ignore. Silver Springs, written about Lindsey years earlier, was one of her most personal songs. Having it dismissed by the band felt like a rejection, not just of her work, but of her voice. She left carrying both her triumphs and her scars, unsure if she and Lindsey would ever stand on the same stage again. Reunion, Silver Springs, and an uneasy peace. By the mid-1990s, Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham had been apart from Fleetwood Mac for years. The wounds between them were still raw, but the demand for a reunion never went away. In 1997, the band decided to come back together for The Dance, a live album and tour marking the 20th anniversary of Rumors. For fans, it was a dream come true. For Stevie and Lindsey, it was a test of whether they could share a stage without reopening the old battles. Night after night, they stood together performing songs that had been written in the middle of their heartbreak. The most unforgettable of these moments came with Silver Springs, the song Stevie had fought so hard for in the past. During the performance, she turned to Lindsey and sang directly to him. "You'll never get away from the sound of the woman that loves you." Her voice carried decades of pain, anger, and longing, and her piercing stare made the tension between them impossible to ignore. The clip became iconic, a reminder that their history could never be neatly tucked away. Despite the charged performances, the reunion was a massive success. The tour was sold out, the live album went to #1, and the group was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame the following year. On the surface, it seemed like they had found a way to coexist, but Stevie made it clear that the old wounds were far from healed. In interviews, she admitted that she and Lindsey would never be touchy-feely friends. Their professional chemistry remained undeniable, but their personal bond was fractured beyond repair. Fleetwood Mac released Say You Will in 2003 with both Stevie and Lindsey, but the process was anything but smooth. Lindsey pushed for perfection in the studio, often clashing with Stevie's freer approach to songwriting. She later described his behavior as provocative, claiming he would go out of his way to challenge her during rehearsals. To outsiders, it was déjà vu. The same cycle of reconciliation, followed by renewed conflict, played out over and over again. Even so, the band continued to tour, selling millions of tickets and proving that the allure of Fleetwood Mac's music was stronger than their internal battles. But behind the scenes, Stevie and Lindsey's uneasy peace was crumbling once again, setting the stage for another painful split. The final rupture and Stevie's breaking point. For decades, Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham had balanced on a knife's edge, able to perform together, but never able to resolve the bitterness that lingered from their past. That balance finally shattered in 2018. Fleetwood Mac was preparing for another world tour when Buckingham was abruptly dismissed from the band. The announcement shocked fans, but for Stevie, it was the end of a long and exhausting cycle. At first, the official statements were diplomatic, framing the decision as a scheduling issue. But Stevie later told Rolling Stone that the breaking point came at the Music Cares Person of the Year event earlier that year. During her speech, she claimed Lindsey mocked her in a way she could no longer tolerate. It was no longer fun, she explained. It was no longer acceptable. For her, the moment crystallized years of frustration. She had carried the weight of his perfectionism, his controlling behavior in the studio, and his dismissive attitude toward her for too long. She admitted simply, she couldn't stand it anymore. Lindsey told a different story. In an interview with the Los Angeles Times, he called it a coup, insisting that Stevie had given the band an ultimatum. Either he left or she would. The split divided fans, with some siding with Lindsey's account and others defending Stevie's perspective. What was undeniable was that Fleetwood Mac, as the world had known them, was finished. In the years that followed, Stevie continued to perform as a solo artist, maintaining her status as the only woman ever inducted twice into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, once with Fleetwood Mac and once as a solo performer. Lindsey, meanwhile, underwent heart surgery in 2019, an ordeal that nearly cost him his voice. Though the two occasionally spoke in passing, they never reconciled in any meaningful way. The death of Christine McVie in 2022 was another blow that closed the door on any possible full reunion. Stevie admitted that without Christine, Fleetwood Mac could never be the same. At McVie's memorial, she spoke briefly with Lindsey, but the conversation was more symbolic than substantive. A fleeting moment between two people bound by music, but divided by years of unresolved pain. In a 2024 interview with Rolling Stone, Stevie summed it up in one line. "I dealt with Lindsey for as long as I could. You could not say that I did not give him more than 300 million chances." Breaking her silence at 76. As Stevie Nicks entered her mid-70s, many believed her story with Lindsey Buckingham had reached its final chapter. Their paths had diverged, their battles were well documented, and the idea of them collaborating again seemed impossible. But in 2025, something remarkable happened. For the first time, Their 1973 album, Buckingham Nicks, was re-released on streaming platforms, a decision that stunned fans who had long waited for its digital debut. The announcement came quietly, through nearly identical posts on Instagram from both Stevie and Lindsey. There was no joint interview, no press conference, and no detailed explanation, just the music, resurfacing after half a century. For many, the re-release was more than nostalgia. It was a reminder of where it all began, back when two young dreamers in love believed they could take on the world together. At 76, Stevie finally spoke openly about why her relationship with Lindsey had always been so difficult. In interviews, she admitted that his perfectionism, his controlling nature, and his habit of second-guessing her had left her feeling suffocated. "Sometimes it felt like he wanted to tell me who to be, not just musically, but in general," she said candidly. "It was exhausting." That exhaustion, carried for decades, was the one thing she confessed she could never stand. Yet in the same breath, she acknowledged the brilliance of what they created together. She told The Guardian that despite the pain, "We made incredible music." It was a bittersweet acceptance, an understanding that the turbulence of their relationship had fueled some of the greatest songs in rock history. Mick Fleetwood once described their bond as both a gift and a curse. And at this stage in her life, Stevie seemed to agree. Whether the re-release of Buckingham Nicks signals a genuine truce between the two remains unclear. But for Stevie, speaking her truth at last was its own kind of closure. After decades of silence, denial, and compromise, she was finally free to say what she had carried all along. That love, brilliance, and resentment had always lived side by side in her connection with Lindsey Buckingham. And at 76, she was no longer afraid to admit it. Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham gave the world timeless music, but at an enormous personal cost. Their story is one of love, betrayal, and survival, and even now it continues to echo in the songs that defined a generation. Do you think their relationship was more of a blessing or a curse for Fleetwood Mac's legacy? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold stories from music history.